Purdue University's latest read on Producer's financial outlook is out this morning. We'll get details of what it might mean for the economy's performance going forward. And the Supreme Court's decisions announced at the end of the latest session have many wondering, how will the legislative process change? We'll dig into that question.
Live! Dude, seriously, a spider just walked right across my computer monitor. Via Farm Journal Studios, this is AgriTalk. This morning we begin with a conversation with Dr. Jim Mintert from Purdue. Then we chat with Ethan Lane from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. I'm handsome newsman Davis Michelson, and now the host of AgriTalk, Chip Flory.
All right, Davis, did you get the little fella out of there safe?
Well, he's really small. He looks like a wolf spider to me, just a little house spider. He's not going to bother anybody. We'll leave him alone.
Great. Oh, okay.
He might be fixing something in my computer, too. I don't know. I'll take it.
No, those are tiny little robots that they send to do that.
Robot spiders.
Oh,
Hello.
robot spiders. Okay,
So,
I get it.
It's either the Geek Squad looking out for me or the Chinese are surveilling me this morning. Either way, I'm good.
I'm going with the
here.
Chinese.
Probably.
I'm going with the Chinese.
It seems more likely.
Yeah. Welcome to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. That is Davis Michelson.
Good morning. Yes, sir.
Rainy day, dude. Another rainy day. And as things stand right now, the rains go all the way back into western Nebraska, western Kansas, up through Iowa, into Wisconsin, northern Illinois, Michigan. It's a soggy son of a gun out there for a lot of people, and we could use some drier conditions, but it sounds like there's rain in the forecast for later this week again. So it's not going to dry out anytime soon.
Well, you and I have flipped because it's sunny and getting hot pretty quickly here in the city of Kansas. But yesterday, for about the first 2/3 of the day, right up to the afternoon show, I guess, just a nice, steady rain. We really needed it. Not a lot of wind that I heard of anyway, just a real nice rain. And now we got some sunshine today.
Yeah, well, we've got to wait a little bit longer before we get that sunshine coming back in our direction up here. All right, Jim Mintert's coming up in the next segment. Ethan Lane at the bottom of the hour. The conversation with Ethan about the Supreme Court decisions and the final rule on Packers and Stockyards should be very interesting. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, man, let's get to the news. What do you got?
You bet. I'll start with the National Weather Service short-term weather outlook, where severe thunderstorms are expected mainly from Kansas into northern Missouri and Iowa this afternoon and evening. Damaging winds, a few tornadoes, and large hail are the expected hazards. Excessive rainfall may bring areas of flooding to parts of the Midwest today. Hot to dangerously hot conditions will impact much of California and from the Central Plains to the northern Gulf Coast today.
You know, it's just, here we are. It's like 65 degrees in northeast Iowa today. Ooh. And that heat that is oppressive is latching on to other areas of the country. It's but don't forget that 6 to 10 day that we looked at yesterday afternoon has the heat coming back in. Actually, it's the 8 to 14 day has the heat coming back in to the Midwest, so by the end of the month or the middle of the month. So things are going to be changing considerably.
Well, private exporters reported sales of 100,000 metric tons of corn for delivery to traditional buyer Colombia during the 23-24 marketing year. Hello, Colombia. Good morning.
It wasn't Mexico buying corn. It's such an incredible thing. Yeah, Colombia's a traditional buyer, but the traditional buyers outside of Mexico have been absent from the market for a while, and here they are with a big buy overnight. That's a good sign.
I've got crop progress report highlights. This crop progress and condition update as of June 30. Corn was 67% good to excellent. That's down 2 percentage points from last week, 11% silking, 6% average. And I brought out the poor to very poor, 9% poor to very poor on the corn there, Chip.
Up 3 points. Up 3 points from last week. 3 points in this index is a big move. So starting to recognize some of the issues in Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa.
Soybeans were also called 67% good to excellent, steady with the prior week. 95% emerged, 20% blooming, 3% setting pods, 8% poor to very poor on your soybean crop. Chip, thoughts on the beaners?
Yeah, it's 8% is unchanged on the poor to very poor on soybeans. I got a feeling that is going to be pushing higher after these really, really soggy rains that we've been getting.
Spring wheat called 72% good to excellent, up a percentage point from last week. 38% headed, just 4% poor to very poor there. The spring wheat apparently looks pretty good.
Right. Oh, it does. Yeah.
Cotton, 50% good to excellent, down 6 percentage points on the week. 97% planted, 43% squaring, 11% setting bowls. And winter wheat, 51% good to excellent. That's down 1 point from last week. 54% harvested compares to 39% on average.
Yeah, the condition ratings on cotton are going down in a hurry. So we got to keep track of that market for sure.
Well, Chip, crop consultant Dr. Michael Cordonnier is using USDA's corn planted acreage figure, but he cut harvested acreage 910,000 acres to 82.5 million acres and maintained his yield estimate at 179 bushels per acre. For soybeans, Cordonnier is using USDA's planted acreage figure, but he cut harvest soybean acreage 750,000 acres to 84.5 million acres and kept his yield estimate at 52 bushels per acre on soybeans.
Yeah, the acreage issue is going to be an issue until we get some resurvey work done is the bottom line there.
Yep. Well, Senator Debbie Stabenow, chair of the Senate Ag Committee, released a statement on the payment error rate for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that's SNAP, calling the national error rate unacceptable. She says, quote, "It's critical that the program is accurate to protect program integrity and to ensure people receive the assistance they need to put food on the table." It'd be great to have this be accurate, Chip.
Yeah, let's get it right. Let's get rid of some of the fraud and see how much money it saves.
Yep. Well, Shell says it will pause construction work at one of Europe's largest biofuels plants due to weak market conditions, the latest low-carbon project to suffer a setback. The project is now expected to go online toward the end of the decade instead of 2025. Rival BP last week said it's pausing 2 biofuels projects in Germany and the United States. Moving in the wrong direction here, Chip.
Yeah. It's the pushback is increasing on some of the green strategies out there, and BP sees it.
You got time for one more real quick? USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service reminds everyone to take the proper precautions during food prep for July 4th celebrations. Thaw the meat or poultry first, marinate your protein in the refrigerator, not on the counter, and keep raw meat and poultry separated. Use different cutting boards and utensils for raw meats and poultry. Safety first on the grill, everybody.
Yeah, don't make a poor grilling decision ruin your 4th of July. Come on. Let's get it all right. All right. Thank you, Davis. Now, coming up next, we're going to have a conversation with Jim Mintert. The latest on the Ag Economy Barometer next.
The best talkers in ag, including you. Join the conversation on AgriTalk. Call us at 855-4TALK-AG.
Davis, the results of the June survey of the Purdue University CME Group Ag Economy Barometer were released this morning. It came with a reading of 105, which is 3 points down from May. Joining us right now to discuss the barometer and what it is telling us, we've got Professor James Mintert. He is the director for the Center for Commercial Ag at Purdue University. and he's the author of the Purdue University CME Ag Economy Barometer. Jim, welcome back to AgriTalk. How are you?
Very good. Great to be back with you, Chip.
Yep, glad you're here. Down 3 points from the previous month. What's it telling you?
So that's a pretty small move in the barometer.
Yep.
So the overall move, not very significant. But if you look at the index of current conditions and the index of future expectations, you can start to get a little more of a clear picture. The index of current conditions actually didn't do anything. It rose 1 point compared to last month, but it's well below this time last year. It's down 26 points on a year-to-year basis. Yeah. The future expectation index declined 5 points. So that's the reason the barometer drifted a little bit lower. It was that small decline in the future expectation index. But maybe the bigger picture is if you look at it on a chart, you can kind of start to see what's going on here. Over the course of the last year, the current condition index, which effectively ask people to appraise, what's taking place on their farm now and how do they feel about it, has been drifting lower for really over a year, but especially the last year. And that index is now sitting at a reading of 90. Future expectation index is at 112. So people are more optimistic about the future, and that's been true over the course of the last year than they are about the current situation. And that 90 is kind of interesting because remember that the barometer is based on, as a base period, our first 6 months of data collection, which was late 2015, early 2016. So at a reading of 90, that tells us people are feeling worse about their current situation than they were in late 2016. And again, I think we talked about this last month, Chip. We all remember 15 and 16. That was the beginning or early days of a downturn, especially in crop agriculture. So that kind of tells you there's some concern out there. People are worried about what's taking place, and they've got hope for the future. That's what the future expectation index is telling us. But they're concerned. They recognize that 2024 is going to be a significantly worse year than, say, 23, 22, or 21.
Right. Yeah, the index of current conditions, Jim, has it been a year that it's been mostly in a sideways pattern?
The current condition index has actually been drifting lower for probably a year and a half.
Right.
The future expectation index has been kind of sideways probably for about 2 years, really. You go back to 2022. Okay. It's bounced around from a reading of about 100 on the low side to a reading of about 125 on the high side. So it's been in that band. So in a way, that's part of agriculture, isn't it? We're always a little more optimistic about the future, right? we always have that optimism that things will be better in the future. So I think we're picking that up. But when they look at the current situation, they think, oh, this isn't as good as what we had last year or the year before or the year before that.
Right, exactly. Okay, let's get into some more of the details here. The financial performance index, it's down another 3 points, and I think the important thing is it keeps moving further and further below 100. It's down to 85. This is where the optimism starts to kind of leave the survey, doesn't it?
Well, the interesting thing about the Farm Financial Performance Index is I think we're starting to pick up a little bit of seasonality in that index. If you look at the chart, so you mentioned the reading this month was 85. That's actually up slightly compared to last month and up again since April. We've seen that same pattern before. If you go back to 21, the index bottomed out in May. If you go back to 22, it bottomed out in May and got better. 23, same story. And we're showing that again right now. So the interesting thing about the index is I think people have some nervousness, some consternation about what's going on with respect to their farm's financial situation at planting time. And I always think about it from a standpoint of when I was helping my dad, right? If you're sitting there looking out the kitchen window and it's wet, you can't get the crop in the ground, and you're worried about what kind of a year this is going to be, what's going to take place, it's tough to get very optimistic about how your financial performance is going to be relative to last year. As we progress into the growing season and things start to look a little more normal, people seem to be picking up. Now, I've only got 4 years of data on that one, Chip, so I can't really say it's a strong seasonal pattern, but it sure looks like it. But your point, again, is if you look at it relative to where we were this time last year, we're a little bit below. My guess is we're going to remain below that going forward.
Right. Okay. Still not a good time, according to the survey, to make much of an investment in the business with some capital expenditures, is it?
No, and that index is really hovering near its all-time low. I think this month's reading was 32. That's 3 points lower than last month. It's, I think, 10 points below a year ago. The all-time low of that index is 31. And, that's consistent with what we're picking up elsewhere. When we followed up and said, if you think it's a bad time for making investments, why do you feel that way? People in recent months have been pointing to rising interest rates. And I think elsewhere in the survey, we're picking up the idea that interest rates are starting to have more impact on farm operations. And I think part of that could be attributable to working capital getting a little tighter and people maybe having a stronger demand for borrowing money for example, operating expenses, clearly from machinery. That's really showing up as more of a concern than what we were picking up earlier.
Okay. All right.
Say, I've got a question here.
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, Professor, I'm not sure. I was just looking through one more time. I'm not sure that I see high inputs costs referenced one time in this report here. And I understand. Okay, we're out of the heavy purchase period here for most inputs for planting. I could see this just being seasonal, but people have forgotten about high cost of inputs already, sir?
No, they haven't. In fact, when we asked about what are your biggest concerns for your farming operation in the year ahead, the number one choice continues to be high input cost.
Okay.
That was chosen by a third of the people in the survey. And that's been fairly consistent. It bounces around a little bit from month to month, but that's been fairly consistent. Number two is lower crop and livestock prices. And then number three is rising interest rates. And as I mentioned a minute ago, if you look at the chart, that rising interest rates is interesting. For the last, 5 months, I think now, that's been going up each month. Back in the middle of the winter, I think maybe in February, only 18% of the people chose interest rates as one of their big concerns. It's been going up every single month in between. This month it was 23%. And again, I think it gets at this idea that the impact of rising interest rates is really starting to hit home here in 2024.
Yeah. Okay. Before we run out of time, did you ask the question again about if there has been any conversation about carbon capture and storage
we did.
For these guys?
Yeah, we did. So
okay.
A little bit of a contrast. 8% of the people in the survey said they've been approached or had a discussion about carbon capture, utilization, and storage with an ethanol plant or with somebody representing an ethanol plant. To put that in perspective, about twice as many people say they've had a conversation about solar energy, roughly 16% of the people in the survey. And then we did the follow-up, and it's hard to get, not a lot of observations here, but we said, well, if you had that discussion, what was the payment rate per acre you were offered? 93% said they were offered less than $25 an acre, which is pretty small. 4% said 50 to 75, 4% said 75 or more. And I've talked to some folks that have definitely had been received offers significantly more than 75. So, but the bulk of the offers pretty low. This is early days with respect to what that market is going to do.
Yeah. Yep. Up, and it explains some of the slow uptake on it. No question about that. Land prices. What are the expectations on land prices?
So the land prices are really kind of interesting this month. There was no change in the short-term value expectation index, 115. It is down compared to last year, 126, so down 11 points. But if you look at the raw responses to the question, the question says, do you think farmland prices are going higher in your area, lower, or no change? I think we're picking up more uncertainty because more people said they're going higher than last month, but more people also said lower than last month, which means fewer people said stay the same. And I think that's a proxy or a substitute for saying, uncertainty, right? There's more uncertainty about what land prices are going to do. The other interesting thing with respect to land prices, Chip, is when we do the follow-up for people who say that over the next 5 years, they think farmland values are going up, we ask why. We're consistently getting in the ballpark of 10% of the people pointing to energy production, namely solar or wind, as a reason why they're optimistic about farmland values.
Yeah. Gotcha. Jim, it's always interesting. Thank you so much for taking time to talk about the details. Appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity, and happy 4th of July to you and all your listeners.
Thank you so much. Jim Mintert, Purdue University. Ethan Lane next.
Time for Markets Now with the experts from ProFarmer.
Joining us now, ProFarmer editor Brian Grady. Got some plus signs in the grain markets, corn and soybeans. Wheat's trading to the downside. But what's going on in corn and beans?
Well, beans, soy oil is ripping to the upside again, and so strong gains there, more than 100 points, and that's benefiting soybeans, which are seeing follow through corrective buying. So rebounding from the recent losses, something that started yesterday and continuing today, and so we'll see if it hangs on or not. Meal market's somewhat of a wait. We do have the August contract trading to the upside, but far deferred contracts are under some pressure. So we'll have to see. There's some spreading action definitely going on in the product markets today.
Yeah, bean oil, when you look at the chart, it's making a breakout move, getting out above those highs that we posted back at the end of May 22nd highs. So it's an important day for bean oil, isn't it?
Absolutely. It continues to show a lot of volatility in that market in particular, and so has a pretty significant influence. But we're, like you said,
real
we're
quick,
seeing corn. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, what's got wheat on the defensive?
Oh, just the more harvest pressure in here,
Okay.
and there just isn't anything positive, so to speak, and so we're pulling back from the gains yesterday.
Okay, cattle complex, man, a nice move to the upside today.
Yeah, absolutely. Feeders moving to the upside, and that's despite the modest strength in the corn market. So we're starting to see more fundamentals come into play there. The cash market last week for live cattle was a record again. Wholesale beef prices continue to charge higher, and so that's supportive there. And then hog futures have been all over the place this morning, currently mostly firmer.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Thank you, Brian. ProFarmer editor Brian Grady, Markets Now.
Opinions expressed on AgriTalk do not necessarily reflect the views of Farm Journal Broadcasting, affiliate stations, or sponsors. The truth is hard to come by these days, unless you listen to AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm Chip Flory. Glad that you are with us on this Tuesday morning. It's a short week, though, Davis. Short week.
It sure is. It's already been a short week. I mean, we're like a day and a half in.
Yeah.
How hard can this
my
be?
goodness. Yeah, markets will be closed on Thursday. We'll still, of course, have some great shows for you coming up on Thursday. Then we'll be back with you live on Friday
That's right.
for free-for-all.
Yep.
Looking forward to that because of some of the things that were decided by the Supreme Court at the end of the session. And I want to talk about some of those things right now with Ethan Lane, VP of Government Affairs, National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Ethan, it's great to talk with you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now I'm excited for Best of Chip Flory on Thursday. I got to mark my calendar.
We've got some fresh content coming your way. No best ofs. Nope.
Oh, okay. Nope. Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So, Ethan, before we get to the Supreme Court rulings that came out at the end of the last session, I want to talk about USDA's new proposal for the final rule on packers and stockyards. Yeah. Start with what it says. What is the final rule?
Well, so this is a proposed rule. It's the latest in a series of rulemakings that makes up the kind of Bidenomics competition push, right? This is the Biden administration and clearly Secretary Vilsack's long-standing passion project is fairness in the marketplace. And in a 95-page rule, what you won't find in there referenced anywhere is the term free market. And I think that really speaks to why cattle producers have concerns about this. Much has been made of this idea of competition and fairness, and it obviously is really important that we have a functioning marketplace that has access and opportunity for everybody. But what this rule tries to do is create a standard by which if you don't get paid on your cattle the same as your neighbor, and it says in the rule, the secretary in that transaction can look at quality. They can look at price. You can look at innovation. All of the things that our producers do to make more money on their cattle, right? Investing in their operations. Those things are all now fair game for the neighbor who maybe has sour grapes next door to say, hey, I wasn't treated fairly in the marketplace. And under the current rule, you have to prove harm to the overall competition environment, right? This rule would open the door for individual harm, meaning I didn't get paid what Joe got paid, so I am now going to seek some sort of recourse to balance that scale. And the net result will be premiums will go away. The buyers of these fed cattle are no longer going to want to take that risk. And what suffers is our ability to innovate and make progress and have higher and higher quality cattle and higher quality beef. It's moving in the wrong direction if true competition is what you're looking for.
So what might these challenges look like, Ethan? I'm just having a hard time understanding that Joe could raise an issue because he got paid $5 100 less on fat cattle at a sale barn. Is that what we're looking at?
No, we're talking probably more in the formula and AMA space than we are in a sale barn transaction. But
okay.
You hit the nail on the head there as far as where the challenge is, right? Because if you read through the proposed rule, the language is incredibly vague. The Trump administration worked on this concept during their 4 years over at USDA, and they put out 4 criteria of what does it look like for there to be a harm in this environment, right? What are the factors that have to be there for this to be true harm? And then what they put on top of it is anything else we may consider that could be relative. Well, this is like that on speed, right? This is a massively broad landscape where it says not only are there those things that are sort of tried and true antitrust violations, which are already against the law in a lot of different areas, right? So this is sort of retreading that ground. But then it goes beyond that and says if it looks or feels like it might not be within the spirit of that, well, the secretary can look at that as well. And it really opens this landscape to the point where it really is subject to where the political winds are blowing. And you can't build a business environment based on popular opinion on Facebook. And that's really what this is sort of set up to do, which is doubly scary when you think about how Secretary Bill Sack and his team are talking about this, which is in the context of consumer prices, right? It's like we're doing this because of cattle prices, but the net result is we're going to lower your grocery store prices. It's a disingenuous way to approach this.
Right. Okay. I get exactly what you're saying, Ethan. But there are some in the industry that really like this proposed final rule on packers and stockyards, aren't there?
There are, and we're always going to have that disagreement. I think they are in the minority, but they are extremely vocal, and they have the right to their opinion. I think the question we as an industry have to ask ourselves is, what do we mean when we say competition? Do we feel like it's important for us to continue innovating? Do we feel like we are owed a profit on our cattle just because we showed up today? And I think that's the question we really have to decide. The cattle industry, I would contend, is the last truly independent supply chain in agriculture.
Yeah.
And I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm incredibly proud to work for that. But that comes with risk. That comes with opportunities if you're willing to work and invest and grab them. And so there have to be winners and losers in some of those transactions. And I think some of those folks that are on the other side of this, and I think they're very well intentioned, but the idea is, no one ever went broke telling people who to blame for their problems. So if you can tell people, look, if you were just getting paid what your neighbor's getting paid, none of this would be a problem. Well, I didn't invest in genetics. I didn't process my cattle. I didn't vaccinate. I didn't do the things I need to do. So did I earn that same premium that the producer next door did? And I hate to put it that way, but I think we have to think in terms of what do we really mean when we say competition, because, this is a free market economy. You got to go out and earn premiums. And there are a lot of producers out there doing that. We can't disadvantage them, in order to make sure that those who didn't put that work in get paid the same.
Yeah. Well, and the quality issue is so important right now, Ethan, because, there is a premium for quality cattle being paid. When you're looking at 1,550, 1,600 pound heifers that are bringing over $200 a hundred at sale barns for local distribution of that prime beef, quality matters in this marketplace.
It absolutely does, and it's a tough environment because there's so much good quality stuff. We're raising better beef in this country than anyone has ever seen, ever, in the history of livestock production. I was talking to a nutritionist for a sports franchise who's worried that their players aren't happy about the beef they're getting, and they said, where do we source better beef? And I said, I promise you, it's not the beef you're sourcing. Wherever you're getting it, you're getting high-quality beef if it's U.S. product, right? Because we know that in the supply chain. So it really does make everybody have to up their game. I mean, this is a competitive environment.
Okay. All right. What is your take on the Supreme Court doing away with Chevron deference?
I cannot overstate what a big deal this is. My entire time in Washington, and the entire time of people who have been here a lot longer than me, this has been such a pivotal case because it really defines that landscape for agencies to go forward and push out a regulation that is well beyond what Congress intended. Congress puts out a regulation and says, we should protect endangered species. And then the agencies go forth and put out a regulation that is extremely specific and well beyond congressional intent. Under the landscape we've been operating under, if we sue to challenge that regulation, the lower courts look at the deference given to the federal agency to interpret what Congress meant. Doing away with that standard means if Congress didn't spell it out, the agency can't just make it up on their own. 98 times out of 100, that is a massive improvement for anybody who is in the regulated community or is doing business with the federal government or the federal government has oversight of, because we're always on the losing side of that transaction. So this is massive. There's going to be a lot of challenges now, and people are going to start looking at where this might have some impact on regulations that are problematic, not just in the cattle industry, but throughout the economy. This is huge.
Yeah. You want to talk about it? We've always paid attention to lawmakers and lawmakers' opinions. What we're going to have to do is get to know their staff a whole lot better so that they do a more specific job of rulemaking in the legislation that they put forward. Isn't that right?
Yes. That is 100% the ball game here is, and I had a member of Congress tell me this the other day. We were talking about this very subject. They're going to have to sharpen their pencils, and they're going to have to really be specific in the pieces of legislation that pass Congress and go to the president's desk, because it really is going to be the standard by which federal rules are implemented. And the thing is, for those of us that kind of are on that small government conservative end of the spectrum that don't feel like we need a whole lot more federal regulations, it's not a bad thing that it's a harder bar, right, to get a new piece of legislation or regulation passed. They should have to work hard. It should have to be extremely, precise. And so that's going to force this in what is already a difficult environment on Capitol Hill. But that's a good thing in our opinion. That's the way the process ought to work.
Dude, all I think about is how the WOTUS process would have been different.
Oh, yeah. And well, you can think about it, right? WOTUS, or like I said, any of these endangered species issues, or any of the rules that USDA puts out, where it's one part sort of congressional direction and 9 parts finger in the wind, right? And so all of that goes away. And you have this landscape where, well, did they write it? Well, no, then you can't do it. It actually brings it in sync with our policy book for NCBA, right? If it's not passed by our members around the country, I can't engage in it. It makes Congress and the administration play by the same rules, and I love that.
Very interesting. I mean, it's going to change your job, right?
Well, it is. I mean, and we've already been having those conversations. You said it. I mean, you said it better than anybody I've heard describe it in the last week. And that is, we're going to have to get to know staff a whole lot better, because there is going to be a heavy load on their shoulders to get the language right. And someone earlier today asked me, what does this mean? I said, well, it means we better get really familiar with the moderates on both sides, because boy, they're going to have a big job ahead of them.
Right. Ethan, thank you so much for your perspective. Really helps. Thank you.
You bet. Great talking to you. Happy 4th.
Yeah, happy 4th to you. Throw a steak on the grill, will you?
Done.
All right. That's Ethan Lane, VP Government Affairs for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Davis and I will be right back.
Do you suffer from talking on the radio phobia? No problem. Send us a tweet at #AgriTalk. And welcome back to AgriTalk, everybody. Your pal Davis Michelson here. Chip Flory joins. No sign of the spider, Chip.
Oh.
Very small.
It's there someplace.
He's there somewhere, lurking.
That's right. He's watching you with all 8 little eyes.
I know, 8 little cameras in that sucker. How do they get it so small?
I don't know.
And it's powered by coal,
surveillance
too.
spider is real.
Yeah, there's a little smear of pollution across my my computer screen here. It looks petroleum-based.
A little exhaust.
Mm-hmm. Something.
Yeah.
Something. Spiders with chemtrails. Oh, that'll be the next thing. Huh? Imagine a web made out of chemtrails. A society can't withstand that sort of pressure. No. That's just not going to work. Not going to work. I'm very interested. I'm very interested, actually, in the conversation with Ethan Lane. Well, I want to talk about the conversation with Dr. Jim Mintert as well.
Okay.
But I want to start where Ethan Lane ended, and I love the sound of this, the idea of it anyway. And he said, in reference to the Chevron ruling, we better get familiar with the moderates.
Yeah.
I like that. If Chevron can kind of pull us toward the middle just a little bit, take some power away from these agencies, I don't know, bro. I kind of like it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Short term, I think this is going to create some chaos in the court system. And that's not a bad thing. Let's get some of the out of control overreach reined in.
Yep.
And I think that's the kind of chaos that we're talking about. Because if a rule and a regulation is acceptable, is providing an environment in which businesses and individuals can thrive, then that's not going to be challenged. It's the rules and regulations, and they're on both sides.
Yeah.
That are stifling business, that are stifling individuals' freedoms, that should be, and I think will be, challenged. Now, so for the quote-unquote short term, that being the next few years, it will be a chaotic situation. Longer term, I think this will encourage, dare I say, force lawmakers to do their job better.
Yeah.
I mean,
see, and that's my concern. To me, the good side is some of these agencies have a little less power to add specifics to interpret Congress. Yep. The will of Congress. Congress has to put in more specifics into legislations that come forth. Okay, great. Dude, this is the least productive Congress I don't know if we've ever seen, but darn close. Now we're...
Ever.
I don't know, dude. It also, on the other hand, sounds like a recipe for things like we're seeing with the Farm Bill. Stuff just drags on and on and on and on and never gets done.
Well, if it is written more specifically, and it is written where agreement can be found between the two parties, then it should find ways to gain passage through Congress. But they're going to have to be very specific. You can't leave it up for interpretation any longer. That's what this means. It is a landmark decision. This is a decision. We've had to live with Chevron deference for 40 years with agencies, interpreting what Congress really intended. Congressional intent is a phrase that I've used a million times, and it should not be necessary.
Yes. And what you're doing is you're making those agencies the actual de facto lawmakers when it comes to the specifics.
Right.
And that is upside down.
And the agencies work with appointed bureaucrats. And some of them are really good. Some of them are not. And it should not be left up to an appointed a bureaucrat to decide WOTUS and the final rules. It should be Congress that does that. That's, I don't know, it's a little document called the Constitution that states that very clearly.
Are we still doing that? Constitution? Is that still a thing?
I think it is. I hope it is, dude.
New rule opens the door for individual harm via Packards and Stockyards Act. I like that idea. But Ethan Lane says moving in the wrong direction of true competition. I don't get it.
Yeah, basically what it is saying, basically what Ethan is saying is that in any open market, there's got to be winners and losers.
Okay.
You've got to have the opportunity to win, but you also have to have the risk to lose. If you've got the risk to lose, it means that you are open to chasing the premiums that a market might offer for quality and for providing any kind of a benefit that comes along with what you are producing and getting paid for it.
Yeah.
Okay, now could that be low carbon corn? It could be. But if someone that is not producing low carbon corn could look at a premium that was paid to one producer and say, listen, just because I didn't do anything to lower the carbon in my corn doesn't mean that I shouldn't get the premium paid for that corn. That's
tricky.
That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Thank you for listening this morning. We really appreciate it. Come back this afternoon, 2:06 Central. We've got a conversation with Chip Nellinger.